Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. My name is Dan Frank, and I am an emergency physician and the residency program director with South Shore University Hospital out on Long Island in New York, a part of Northwell Health. And I am joined by some of my colleagues here as well. Dr. Yanis also representing us here at the South Shore University Hospital. And we have a couple of our other colleagues here, Dr. Mukherjee representing North Shore LIJ, also part of Northwell Health, along with Tom Pereira. And Andrew Barbera, who is joining us from Florida as well, who will be introducing each of us introducing our program. But on behalf of the Faculty Development Committee with SAEM, we are here to discuss a little bit about what it means to start new residency program, especially new residency programs, especially in the current environment, along with some of the challenges, both cultural and even logistical, that we've had to tackle just as times have changed. And I'm going to let each of the three programs represented here kind of delve into some of the specifics. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Barbera first. Andrew, why don't you take it away?
Thank you very much. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen because I do have some slides prepared. Okay, so I'm Andrew Barbera. I'm a program director and the founding program director for Lakeland Regional Health Emergency Medicine Program. We are located in Lakeland, Florida. If you have no idea where that is, that's okay, but it's right directly between Tampa and Orlando. It is a hidden gem. We are either the first or the second busiest emergency department in the country by numbers every single year for the past 5 years. Which is excellent. We just received accreditation in September 2023. So we have an intern class who is going on to PGY2 and have a new intern class starting in July for our second class. Disclosures, like any good presenter, I have none, unfortunately. I would love some. So if you have any type of opportunity for me, please let me know. But really what I'm going to get into is kind of starting a new program and starting it from scratch. So I started at Lakeland in 2020, October, just after the pandemic got through the first wave in New York. And then I moved from New York down to Florida for the second wave through Florida, which was fantastic. But I will say that doing it at a challenging time was really nice because it kind of made us put our feet to the fire and we produced a really good product. But what I really like to do is start with my why. So every time you look at starting a new program or undertaking a large project like this, you really need a why. And the why needs to be not just yours, but it needs to be why the hospital, why the community, why the department is also looking for and trying to support a residency program. Because all of those things are going to be important with your resources, your need, the buy-in, and the cultural changes that are going to be required to having a teaching program. So one of the things that you really need to address is, does the community need more emergency medicine doctors? Most of the time, the answer is yes. That is a big why. You need to either recruit to that community because it's a hard place for them to retain physicians, or it's a place where you would like to have board certified emergency medicine physicians come and practice because it's really important to make sure that we're leading the ship. In addition to that, does the institution require additional workforce in the sense that once you have residents that graduate, are they going to stay as attendings and continue to propagate excellent care among the community? Even if it's not at your hospital, it will be at the hospital next door. And that's equally as important because you want to make sure that your institution is taken care of, but also that your community is also taken care of. The pandemic, we all realized that we very much need emergency medicine doctors, and we really, really need strong emergency medicine doctors, both in clinical care, but also with the mindset and how to propagate how we are as physicians and what we value and kind of our approach to patient care and hospital along with administration, because we really touch everything, and it's really important to continue to spread emergency medicine among the greater community and across the country. And then the last thing I look at is not having a program. Is that an actual disservice to the community? Is it an actual disservice to the greater emergency medicine community based on the site that would be producing it? A lot of that you have to look at the training site, the pathology, the faculty that would be involved, and decide how good of a training center that would be. So all of those things I looked at. When I interviewed around, I actually interviewed for quite a few programs that were looking to start new programs. This was the one that really stuck out to me for all of the reasons that I said. There was a large community need. It was going to be a fantastic site to start an emergency medicine doc program. And really, it had everything that I wanted to produce excellent emergency medicine doctors. So what do you need to do next? So next, you need to kind of define what you're going to be doing from the beginning. And you really need to come up with a blueprint. Beautiful thing is ACGME provides you with that blueprint in multiple different ways. Not only in the core requirements, but also the specialty specific requirements. And then actually, when you're filling out the application, it's all set out there. So you have to be able to go through it very systematically and fill that out. A lot of the things that you're going to require and the numbers you're going to need are going to be based off of the number of residents you're looking to start with. So everything that you're going to do is based off of the full complement of residents. So for me, we have 15 residents per class, but I needed to base everything off of 45 residents from day one. That's really important because you need to make sure that the hospital, the C-suite, and your department are all prepared to provide the resources for that many residents from day one, even pre having any residents there, because you still have to go through the process of developing the curriculum, developing the rotations, developing your recruitment cycle and how you're going to interview and getting all of those faculty involved. So once I got all of that down and kind of went through the numbers of patients, the volume, the pathology, the acuity, and the number of procedures that we'd have, it was easy to kind of figure out how many residents I'd have from there too. Some people I've talked to really enjoy starting with a small residency class, and I think that's great. I will say if you have the ability to start somewhere around 12, 12 residents makes it really nice to keep somebody on an off-service rotation every single time to kind of continue the culture of academics and make sure that your emergency residents are part of the team on that off-service constantly. So it just kind of breeds that culture within that department. One of the things that I really had to do post-pandemic was, for me, I didn't have any ability to hire in a lot of new faculty just because at that time, if we all remember, some of the patient volumes were dropping, shifts were kind of compressing. So I couldn't go looking and trying to recruit very well experienced faculty. So I had to look at the faculty that we had on hand and really identify the key players that were interested, motivated, and then also enjoyed it, because those are going to be the main things in trying to develop faculty members. The other thing you have to do is make sure that they have protected time. This is something that I made sure that I had in writing prior to signing my own contract, was making sure that I knew exactly how many APDs I was going to have, exactly how many core faculty I was going to have, how much they would be paid, how much time they would have, and what resources I'd be able to get to them to go to CME events and other types of things. Because if you're going in and you don't have any of these things predefined, it's going to be a lot harder to do it once you're trying to establish this. And this is going to be key again, because if you're trying to do everything, it gets exhausting very fast. So it's nice to have people who are going to be willing to help you out, and also that you can develop while you do it. They can help and learn how to do things so then they can take over when you move on to the next project. Patients kind of speaks for itself. You kind of have to go through your yearly volume, your critical care numbers, the acuity, do a deep dive into the amount of procedures that are done, just to make sure that you have the numbers to support the amount of residents that you're looking to start. One of the other things that you really need to have defined is what kind of equipment and toys you're going to need, because a lot of times when you're starting a program, either you're going to be at a hospital that has lots of resources, or you're going to be at a hospital that has very little resources. And it's going to be hard for you to get the stuff that's required when you add, 2 to 3 people per area for patient care, including just computers, workstations, and stuff like that. If you're trying to, really go deep, which we did, you have to make sure that you have ultrasound machines available for them to learn, all the fun toys, gyroscopes, all of the fiber optics, simulation equipment, and the facilities, including resident areas, call rooms, and a simulation lab if you have it available. And if not, are you willing to develop it? Is the hospital willing to look at that stuff and help develop it so that you have the resources to teach your residents? So all of that stuff can really be looked at what you're required to do through ACGME. So I don't want to go through too much of it. A big part of it will be the pediatric experience, and that is stressed pretty hard right now by ACGME. ACGME has been looking very strategically at new emergency medicine programs and their applications to make sure that they're producing excellent residencies, especially given kind of the cultural shift in emergency medicine accreditation and residencies across the country. So a lot of this stuff is really important to make sure that you stress on your application if you're looking to do it. One of the main things is your faculty teaching experience. So depending on how many residents you're going to have is going to define the number of core faculty that you need. So you need 3 to 1 resident to faculty ratio. So for me, I have 45 total residents. I'm going to require 15 total core faculty members. Now, my institution allowed me to actually take on 18 because I argued that we would require additional resources at the beginning when we don't have senior residents to help teach our interns which was really nice. And 3 of those are APDs. So again, looking at your numbers are going to define how many associate program directors, assistant program directors, and supportive personnel for your program. So look at the numbers you're looking for first, and then it'll tell you kind of what resources are required and what you need to go to your hospital and present to them. Now, once you have your faculty identified, one of the main things that they look for is teaching experience. So it's nice to have lots of faculty that are enthusiastic and want to be involved, but ACGME really, really stresses that you have core faculty that have some type of teaching experience. One of the main things is that they don't really define what the teaching experience is required. They don't need to have been involved in previous residencies or residence at the institution that you're opening it. They look for the last 3 to 5 years of experience, but this can go for medical students that are rotating. This can go for, PA students, NP students that are rotating with them. All of those things do count. You just have to phrase it correctly on your application and let them know that this is what their teaching experience is. Now, gold standard is teaching residents. So it's really important to make sure that you do capture quite a few faculty members that have medical school teaching, whether it's through medical students or previous residents. Again, it's going to be really important to try to recruit some experienced faculty. They're going to be a big crutch for you when you try to change culture within the department and the institution, but also when you have the intern class and you're trying to spread yourself between conference clinical shifts so you can do clinical teaching and then recruitment season, because that's a very tough time to time management across all 3 boards. So it's really nice to have people who are experienced in at least some of that so that they can kind of take one of those things at least partially off your plate. If you don't have faculty teaching experience, you need to get some. So one of the things that you can do is you can start offering medical student rotations at your institution. This is very easy to do. You basically just put it up on VSLO after you define your curriculum and kind of meet with all the players, and then you can start recruiting some residents. The hard part with that is a lot of times on VSLO, you're looking for audition rotations. And if you don't have a program, you're not likely going to be able to recruit people who would like to go to a place to try it out. With that said, there's tons of residents coming from the Caribbean, including St. George, Ross, some of the other schools that are looking for clinical rotations during their 3rd and 4th year. So this is a good group that you can capture and kind of stick with people who want to be core faculty members so that they actually get some medical school teaching experiences and understand what they need to do, but also learn from this experience. The other main thing that I found that ACGME has really been stressing is scholarly activity. Now, this is, very much defined within the core curriculum and the specialty specific curriculum and requirements from ACGME. For me, the gold standard is obtaining a PubMed ID. Now, there's still a huge spectrum within that of what that PubMed ID is, but it can be as much for a case report as much as a prospective double-blinded study. So you just need stuff, really, to make sure that you check this box, and then you can continue to develop it. Now, if you're trying to get a whole bunch of stuff off the ground at the same time, it's going to be important to make sure that you're taking care of and looking at the low-hanging fruit, because you're going to want some numbers behind your application as well. You also want to have stuff in development that will progress to be very good studies, but getting some of the case reports, poster presentations, and other talks are really important just to get the numbers into the application so that they understand that your program is very much committed to doing this. So for me, I came to a very busy community center. We were starting an entirely new GME program across the board. I was the first program director that actually walked in the door and was there before my DIO was on board too. So what this meant was none of my faculty had scholarly activity within the last 5 years. I think after doing a really deep dive, we got maybe 3 things out of the 18 people. So I needed to really make sure that we developed this. So I did monthly meetings where we walked through with every single core faculty member that was required to be there, and developed projects that could be done looking at retrospective studies and stuff. We have Cerner and we have a really good analytics team. So getting these numbers was very easy. So it was basically coming up with a good idea, running the numbers, and then sitting down and writing these things up. Within a year, we were actually able to get 35 PubMed IDs for our application, which is really fantastic. With that said, again, it was an entire spectrum. I think the majority of them were likely case reports with a couple of retrospective studies thrown in. We did a ton of stuff regarding the monoclonal antibodies because we were one of the larger centers that was actually doing it through the emergency department. So we had a lot of data based on that. And then we had a ton of retrospective stuff. The other thing I did was I identified other players in the hospital that really enjoyed research, were committed to it, and had a good head on their shoulders on how to do it at the institution I was at. So I was new to the institutions. We have a clinical pharmacist group who is awesome, just absolutely fantastic. So I got them involved very early because this is stuff that they like to look at and are already doing. And we basically paired them with some of our faculty members so that they could also develop my faculty members in how to look at studies, how to look at numbers, and how to look at opportunities to get published. So this is a big undertaking and really took a lot of hours, not just from what I was doing to start the program, but from each faculty member, because I really required each of them to get at least one PubMed ID in order to become a core faculty member. The other thing you can do is really take advantage of your network. So one of the things that you can absolutely do is get your core faculty to develop a lecture and then go give it at one of your friends' institutions. So that counts for scholarly activity as long as it's not doing it to your own residents. So all you really have to do is pick up a phone and say, hey, my old program director, could you maybe spare an hour during your didactics so that I have a faculty member that can come and do a presentation? The answer almost undoubtedly will be yes, because I'm sure they're also looking for content and people that are not just from their own program to kind of come and do some teaching. So that's a huge way of getting additional low-hanging fruit and showing that your faculty are really interested and committed to teaching emergency medicine. The other thing that they really stress is your curriculum. Now, again, you don't have any residents yet, so you have to develop an entire program without any current residents. So this includes your entire 3-year didactics. So you need to have an outline. You don't have to have each and every single current power plan done, but you do need to have an entire 3-year didactics with basically subject material, what they're going to learn, and everything else. I use the ABEM core content. It goes through everything very nicely. The other thing I did was Foundations of Emergency Medicine. It's free, it's awesome, it's unbelievable, and the residents actually love it. And it also has a really good curriculum for each PGY specific year. So you can do a lot of things in small groups as well. You need goals and objectives for each and every single rotation based on the competencies. And then you also need to have basically goals and objectives for your own conferences. And then you need evaluations of everything. This is one of the other things that you can develop, but you can also crowdsource and look outside of your institution at people who have experience in developing these and what they use, and then kind of come up with what's best for you. This includes evaluations of your faculty, your residents, your staff, your entire program, including didactics, each rotation, and everything else. These are just some fun pictures of our intern year doing our boot camp, and then all of the other resources our hospital provides, including equipment. I won't get too far into buy-in because I know the other program directors on here are going to go pretty much in detail on how to do cultural change, but I will say you really need the buy-in from the beginning. You will not be able to develop a program or get through a site visit or anything else without having your buy-in from the entire institution, your department leadership, and then also your faculty. You need to make sure that you show the benefits to the faculty, but also align your own goals with developing a strong program with what the department's looking for and what the institution's looking for. Remind your faculty members about their training. I love to do this when people start complaining. I just say, you remember back when you were going on to shift as an intern and you're like, man, I can't wait to work with that attending. It's going to be awesome. And then that, man, I really don't want to go to my shift today. I'm working with Dr. Blank. You don't want to be Dr. Blank. You want to be the other one. Remember that and kind of go off of what your own experiences were. The other thing I really stress is make sure you give ownership to the faculty. Make them part of the project, but also make them own the project. If they own it, they're going to want to do it well. We're all adults. We all have a little bit of type A personality and we all want to win. So you're not going to give them a project that they're not going to want to do. Meet with them all, find their interests, figure out what they like to do and give them that as their project. A large part of this is, you can give somebody didactics, you can give them sim, you can give them different types of scholarly activity. You can put them in charge of wellness. Whatever it is their thing, make it their thing and make them own it. And then you can just be there to mentor them and help build it up. And then celebrate every single win. The more you celebrate, the more positive reinforcement they get, the more they're going to want to be involved, and the better it is going to be for your program, for recruitment, for morale, and for the entire institution. Initial recruitment after you actually get your program accredited is going to be really important, especially these days where it's hard to actually recruit quality residents. You need to make sure that this is on the forefront of your mind. A large part of this is going to be based off of the timing of your accreditation, because you could be accredited at the beginning, the middle, the end, or anytime during recruitment season. So I was fortunate and got my accreditation in mid-September. But I know people who have gotten theirs in December and they still tried to match for that year's class. You don't want to start, advertising or showing off a program that isn't accredited. It's poor form. So you really want to have that accreditation before you start spreading the word. So for us, we were lucky and kind of had almost a full season, although we didn't have any preseason advertisement that year. For me, one of the number one things I did was I interviewed very, very broadly and very, very deep. So most places will tell you if you have back in the day before 2020, if you had a well-established program, you probably only had to interview 10 times per the residents that you wanted. So for me, it would have only been 150. I went into the mindset that I needed 15 to 20 with a goal of interviewing approximately 300 for 15 spots. This way, I knew that not only would I interview hopefully enough to match, but I would also interview, and each of those people that came to my presentation, came for a second look, came to interview me and met my faculty, they would go out and spread the word about my program because I was going to put my best foot forward and show off my program. So this is not free advertisement, but it's cheap advertisement. The only thing you're paying for it is with your time. So we interviewed approximately 260 the first year and then 284 this past year. But it's great because you can see it exponentially getting bigger with the amount of people who are applying, how many people actually reach out to you to become faculty members, not only at your institution, but are trying to get hired in, et cetera, and so forth. Then on the actual interview day, you kind of have to structure it. I know a lot of programs struggled with the virtual interview platform. The good thing is people aren't going to travel, so they're not paying anything. So again, it's just a time cost. So you're actually able to capture probably more than you would if you were doing it virtually than if you're doing it in person, especially as a new program. I made sure I gave a 45-minute presentation at the beginning of each interview session to all 18 of my interviewees that day. I didn't like having a canned one or having a recorded one because, again, this is the first year I need to set the tone. So I went through everything from, the community, the hospital, the department, the faculty members, what to do on a Friday night, everything else that you might ever want to show why people would want to go there. And then I really stressed the clinical experiences that they would get, the number of procedures they'd get, and the acuity of our shop, because it's really important. Second looks were fantastic. I highly recommend them and promoting them because it's great to get them to actually come and walk through your ER. It goes a long way. We did a ton of virtual open houses to advertise, and then we offered shadow shifts if people wanted to come back and kind of hang out and watch what we did in action. Getting a medical school affiliation will help you greatly, as you will more likely to recruit people directly from that school, and having audition rotations early so that people can come through your shop and see who you are and know that you're not just opening a whatever program, but a good program is really important, because again, they'll go back out and spread the word. They'll spread the word on the interview trail, on the forums. And that brings me to the next big thing, which is social media. You need to make sure that you're on social media. This was a struggle initially for us because the institution that I'm at did have fairly strict social media guidelines, but we worked with them and with our marketing department and legal department to ensure that we were meeting whatever guidelines they wanted to make sure that we were meeting. And they worked with us to make sure that we were able to actually advertise ourselves in the hospital appropriately to get people to know who we are and then come out for us. And you got to prove yourself. You got to show up to things. You have to teach. You have to actually go to other programs and go to medical schools and conferences and get up and talk because this is going to spread the word to faculty, residents, to medical students, to everybody else. And then the other big thing is I had my own faculty, and then this year I had my residents reach back out to their medical schools to advertise who we are, kind of give a blurb, offer to do a talk on emergency medicine to the interest groups and everything else. And I think that's really important because it puts a face to who we are. And then sell, sell, sell. Like I said before, you got to sell everything. Sell the resources your hospital has, the support, the consults that you're friends with, how easy it is to admit a patient, how many procedures you're doing. One of the biggest things that I did this year was I sat down pretty much before every single week of interviews and went through the procedure logs for my residents, and then I announced the numbers for my interns. And we had very high numbers because we have a very high acuity shop, and they were able to basically go through each pod and do the procedures. So this goes a long way to show what opportunities they're going to have and that the attendings support you to do that. And then also make sure you sell the city, sell the population, sell your patients, sell the age and what people do outside of the hospital for fun. If you're in a special location with amusement parks or beaches or anything like that, make sure you show that off too. I went through, restaurants, my favorite places to go to eat, the food scene, the breweries that are in downtown, things like that, because it is important because they're not just bringing themselves, but they're bringing their family, they're bringing other people with them. And I really wanted to sell the community and how supportive it is to those people they're bringing with them. This is just kind of a program highlight that I left at the end of my 45-minute talk because I think it's really important to sell. For me, I went through it very quickly because I'd just given them a 45-minute talk, but I wanted to bring it all back together. So I would sell basically this way. The reason I would go to my program if it was offered to me today is because we are consistently the top busiest emergency departments in the country. We have high volume, approximately 200,000 patient visits every year, incredibly high acuity with about 20% critical care numbers, almost 50% admission rate, incredibly high procedure numbers up to this point. Our 15 intern class have now done over 300 intubations total. We have community outreach. We have an incredibly diverse patient population with urban and rural patients going to our only center because we are the only main center in a tri-county area. We're a cardiac STEMI center, a stroke center, a level 2 trauma center, and the only trauma center, again, within the tri-county area. We have a dedicated pediatric emergency department that sees 50,000 patients per year with 11 PEM-trained doctors. We have an in-house SIM center. We have incredibly robust clinical research. All the training is done here on site. We don't ship you off anywhere. We have all the experiences for you now. We offer work-life balance, and we protect your didactic time. So that's basically how I leave my interviewees. Because I think it's really important to stress all of the clinical experiences, what the reasons are that you would go to that program. With that said, these are all of our social media handles, and if you do the QR codes, it brings you to our pages. I won't take up any more time because I know everybody else has a lot to talk about too.
All right. Andrew, thanks so much for a lot of those tips. I can certainly identify with a lot of them, having gone through this in the recent past, and I think, like you said, a lot of good things to sell about your program. So thanks for that. With that, I'm going to say let's move along. I'm going to turn it over to our colleagues from the North Shore LIJ program. If Dr. Mukherjee, you want to take the helm from here and
Sure.
share your thoughts about your experience about having a combined programs and so on.
I'll share my thoughts and share my slides. I'm Pik Mukherjee. I'm at the Municipal Health, the Zupier program at North Shore LIJ. So this is a bit of a niche topic. There are a lot of parallels that Andrew talked about worrying about accreditation and faculty and your write-ups. The situation that I was in some years back was that I had been already the EMIN program director, and then had moved over and was the categorical EM program director in a well-established New York program that was a 4-year program. In the years that I was there, our institution, Northwell, had gone up and bought out every local hospital and was vying for buying power and conglomerate power against Mount Sinai and NYU in New York. And so all of the programs in its main hospitals merged. So radiology, OBGYNs, surgery, EM, not so much, because there was this funny thing where the program at the other major hospital 2 miles away was a 3-year program. And of course, that meant that we were left mostly untouched. But finally, the day came that was, you know what, we can't have two separate programs, 2 miles apart, under the main umbrella. We want to combine these programs. And just figuring out what that block curriculum was going to look like was something like a 12-month sit-down process. So the nuts and bolts of that decision were actually very unique to our program. If you were in this situation, you would basically go, how does one do this? And you would literally type into Google probably, I have to combine two programs. And the first hit you would get that is still there, because it was there in 2015, it's the same first hit, is going to be a one-page PDF that was written as a summary for a radiology program. These are the options you have. And this is basically a summary of a couple of pages on the ACGME website and in our program requirements. And it's going to say you have two choices. You can have one program with your program number, absorb the other, and the other one will withdraw. Or you can merge to a brand new program number, and both programs will withdraw. And then the very next thing you will do is you will never ever choose the second option because it is bureaucratically extremely the worst of the two options, especially if you have, which we did, two programs that were pretty well established, that we had a history of. It wasn't the situation where I don't know who my faculty might be or what rotations I'm choosing from or what scholarly activity is going to be. I actually have years of PEN and CCC documents and things about what the program does. So what you might do is, depending on the institution, you might need to, when you draw that new block diagram, add rotations and maybe see what needs a PLA if it's outside your institution. That didn't even apply to us. Everything that our one program had was within our umbrella institution, was the reason we were combining. So, never say never. Did you ever choose the option where you get a brand new program number? Well, again, the bureaucratic things you must do for that, like brand new accreditation, like a new program, inevitable schedule for site visits, new faculty, deep dive, all of that is being. So for some reason, we do this anyway. I would still pick a program to be absorbed. And for us, it was really a matter of figuring out, are you going to draw up a 3-year block diagram or a 4-year block diagram? And whichever it is, that program number is the one that's going to absorb, right? So yeah, I think that there is a little bit of stuff to talk about here that might be useful for a general group. So we'll keep it at it's not the ABCs of E, it's the ASK, the ASK. And so the A, the ACGME. So that's the easiest starting point. You're going to know your program requirements in and out for both the new program or the merger. You're going to actually have a phone call with the executive director of the Residency Review Committee. And back in 2015, it's the same thing. It was Felicia Davis, and this person will help you. And they will be some back and forth between the Residency Review Committee and the specific needs and choices that you're about to make in the program. And essentially, this is, why don't you just tell me what I should write to make this acceptable to a Residency Review Committee so that we can get what I want, is a smooth transition, a voluntary withdrawal of one and acceptance of the other, and an initial accreditation, right? What they have the option to do for both a merge program and a new program is a probationary withholding, we'll see, period, where you do not get initial accreditation, and then they give you some things that you need to work on to get that. So to avoid that, close communication with the ACGME. What's the S? Well, the S is not going to be shareholders. This is, again, I think, applicable to both. It's allowed list of folks. It starts with the RSC for what you're allowed to do, and then it goes down the list of what they will let you do. And towards the bottom of the list, you have the people who you need to be on your team and who will be belligerently resistant to change, because they're mostly humans, and humans are belligerently resistant to change. So you have to go in expecting that you're carefully chosen, this is the best of all possible worlds. I am certain that this is a great thing for our program and our faculty and our trainees. We'll be met with jeering, angry, throwing of pies in your face. So you need to have some time, and we were lucky because we had a year plus just before any paper we go in to figure out the logistics of the 3 versus 4 year. It actually bought us time to figure out the shareholder stuff, figure out what we're going to be allowed to do and what we're not going to be allowed to do. And one of the biggest advantages I think we learned from this was that in the setting of a merger, you're essentially adding resources. You're essentially adding potential faculty. You can pick the cream of the crop from multiple institutions to have the most beautiful scholarly activity list that you had, the most experienced people. You can put into place the systems you want to continue. Maybe your program has something you're really proud of, and the other program has something that they're really proud of, and neither program wants to let it go. And of course, the answer is why not both? And anytime you can say, listen, we have picked the best rotations across our large, and for us, it was a lot of hospitals, a large institution. You can say, well, you know what? We are now flexible. When you guys complain about something that the RC must make us do this much critical care time, this much pediatric time, where are you doing that time? And if your experience now isn't what it was, because things change, and the fellows used to be here, great teachers, but now they take home call. And my residents really who glowingly read this rotation are now grumbling about it. Okay, guess what? You're a larger footprint now, you have options. So being able to sell that to the shareholders, especially the faculty and the residents, is listen, this is a good thing for you, is a huge thing. And again, you're going to do this in line with knowing the program requirements to make the RRC happy. And the last thing is your KPI, because I had to have a K, right? Because it's ask. So I figured it's KPI. So what does that mean? To get the initial accreditation and to get this program is a no problem program and go forth and be happy and train amazing docs, you need now the DIO chair to have glowing reviews coming out of the gate because they are watching carefully. And you need the RC to say, all our concerns have been addressed. And what does that mean? That means you reviewed the last 5 to 10 years of program citations. You reviewed any time that your program had communication you had to respond to, and you have addressed those things, right? So I mentioned the year plus we had to do this pre-work of what it's going to be. That was time to get buy-in. So the eventual ACGMA survey that is going to go to my residency class is going to come out positive. Differently from a new program, that means buy-in from the people who are already there. And that is probably the hardest thing because, again, I signed on for X, and now I haven't graduated yet, and you're trying to sell me Y. And our strategy for that was to say, you know what? If you sign on for X, you get X. You'll have additional options available to you that might make X better than what you thought, but you signed on for X, so you're going to get X. Right? I'm no deception here. They will still be angry, but that is, in our view, that was the way to go. Recruitment. What Andrew was talking about, I'm going to over-recruit and over-advertise and sort of over-communicate the existence of my program, building the base for future years. Well, you're not a new program. You have the same program number. Maybe the name changes, maybe it doesn't. Depends on your sponsor institution. But again, everyone was watching the match. You were watching it. Your DIO was watching it. And so that means the better you do recruitment, the better you're going to do in the match. And that first match or two out is going to be very scrutinized. And finally, faculty time. One of the ways you know that the residency experience is changing or the reviews are not what you expected is both by evaluation and assessment from your faculty, right? If you have a lot of time spent with your residency class and your new people coming in, you will want to know if there's going to be a problem on that forthcoming ACGME survey, but you can get a lot of evaluations where you can actually really address the typical, I would say, there's someone in the class who there's a question about, hey, can you please check out this person? I faculty feel like this person's not coming along. Okay, we'll look at it. You need to have extra hands-on and extra eyes on, extra data points, because you don't have a number of years of time to give that feedback, right? You want to have a 3 to 6 month turnaround on that evaluation, and that means that extra faculty time is also extra teaching time, right? Which makes the residents feel like, yeah, the new changes, I'm not being ignored. If anything, I have more attention towards me. That's what I have. I think there was a lot of stuff around the morale, the managing change, the leadership ability of your core faculty team to have kind of a shared message and over communicate that message that I think Andrew was talking about a bit, and I'm sure Dan is going to talk about when he talks about culture. So I'm going to stop there.
Well, thanks, Pick. And, you started out by saying that this is kind of a niche topic, but I think the more I'm listening to, thinking about what Andrew had to say, what you have to say, and what I'm going to go into is that there's a lot of common threads here that I think are just applicable to everybody. So I'm going to kind of take the helm from here. Let me just pull up my slides here. And let me just start the slideshow here. I'm going to just kind of start then by also kind of introducing the next and final phase of this talk by, again, kind of specifically weaving in some of the cultural challenges specifically that I think both of the previous speakers had kind of touched on. And again, doing this from the lens of a relatively new program. So let me first quickly just introduce myself. Again, my name is Dan Frank. I am the current and founding program director of the residency here at South Shore University Hospital, also part of Northwell Health. Dr. Debbie Yanis is one of our associate program directors who was going to be helping me here as well. But, again, coming from the lens of a relatively new program, we are now just recruited our 6th year and we'll be graduating our 3rd residency class. So we are still a relatively young program. We welcomed our first class in 2019. And I think as we kind of moved forward through a lot of the challenges that both of you talked about in terms of recruitment and establishing ourselves within the hospital and getting buy-in and recruiting faculty, recruiting new residents, there were certainly a lot of those challenges in the beginning. But as we've now tried to establish ourselves over the last several years, I think Debbie and I can both agree that the vision that we have as faculty kind of coming in may have been a little bit different than what some of those first residency classes thought. And so let me just kind of start with this. This is comes from the MATCH program a few years back, and comes from a survey of what U.S. Senior medical students kind of cited as important factors in ranking certain programs. And you can see that, overall goodness of fit are some of the top markers, quality of residents in the program, reputation of the program. These were kind of some of the most important factors that they ranked. And as a new program, you don't really have any of this, right? And that's kind of one of the biggest challenges that you're facing, especially in the beginning, that it's hard for new residents to gauge if they'll be a good fit, what the quality of their co-residents would be, or even the reputation of the program, because you just don't really have it yet. And so that then kind of starts to go towards the types of residents or that you're going to be recruiting into your program. And in a lot of ways, it can be a good thing, right? And you're getting people into your program who are going to see that upside. So one of the biggest things that you can always reinforce that we did was you're going to get a lot of one-on-one faculty attention. We had a decent sized faculty here. We recruited a small residency class. There was going to be plenty of attention. You get those, motivated, I'll call them pioneering and intrepid personalities who are eager to build and shape and mold a program. And, Pick, you mentioned kind of the resources of Northwell Health as an institution, a number of hospitals. Andrew, you kind of mentioned this as well. The toys, the equipment, the ultrasound equipment, our simulation resources, things of that nature were really extensive and available to everybody here. They had a lot of support, even with a small residency class. So those that kind of see that upside are really a lot of who you're going to get. But I think very much in the beginning, even though these are a great motivated group of young doctors, what they don't have in the beginning are senior residents, right? They don't have chief residents. They don't have people that can kind of help indoctrinate them into working as residents and making that transition from being a student into a resident, somebody who's there to train and to learn, but at the same time also has a job, right? Has some obligation to their institution, their hospital, to their patients, and to the program. And so trying to get alignment amongst all these stakeholders, we found was actually one of our biggest challenges. We wanted to, make sure everybody understood what our mission was, kind of establish what some of our core values could be. And all this kind of translates again into culture. And I think especially during those first few years, while I think we absolutely can say we had, a successful first year, who are now, I can tell you, all doing well. Getting everybody to align in some of these things took a little bit of time. So, reestablishing what your mission was. In our case, this was our mission statement that we popularized about building efficient leaders in emergency medicine who can succeed in any clinical setting by caring and advocating for diverse and vulnerable patient populations. And we do this, and again, this kind of became something that we had to reinforce, we noticed after the first year, about, not just being nice to each other. That's how you're going to establish your relationships with other residents and other departments within the building, but also, being disciplined, right? Our residents had to learn that, yes, they just go from students now to residents, that yes, they're here to train, but this is also a job. They have to learn to be disciplined in showing up to work on time, seeing as many patients as possible, doing their reading and their other studying outside of the clinical realm. This was a bit more of a challenge than you might think. And I say this because I think one of the most tangible examples I could give as I continue to kind of go through some of these core values. One of the most tangible examples I can give is this accountability that our residents might feel to, say, calling out of work, right? It's an example I use with our attending colleagues. As attending physicians, if we're going to call out of shift, we don't do it for trivial reasons, right? We're doing it, certainly if you're ill, it's not meant to mean you should forego your own self-care, but certainly if you're ill or if there's some other family emergency, there are good reasons to call out of work. But we do it with an understanding of what the consequences are, right? We may call out of work with the understanding that I may try to find somebody who can cover my shift. There may be somebody, depending on your institution, who's on call who then has to be called in, and it inconveniences them. Or you have some other folks that are just, you can't find coverage, and your other colleagues or other teammates are going to be working a person short, right? And it changes kind of their workflow for the day. So again, as attendings, even if we need to call out of work, and sometimes there are good reasons to do it, we do it with the understanding that there are some real tangible consequences that we and our teammates may feel from it. When you're a brand new residency without a full cohort, you have a resident on, an off-service rotation, you have others that just came off overnight, maybe someone's on vacation. If they're calling out of work, there may literally be nobody to cover the shift, and it's, such is life, right? They don't feel the consequence the same way that I think we as attendings do. And again, that's one tangible example I'm giving, just because that understanding of consequence and that has a lot to do with how you breed accountability and discipline. And again, back to these core values, it's about how you breed collegiality and understanding that you are teammates with your colleagues. And especially in emergency medicine, they will feel the effects of what you do and don't do. And again, it correlates to being reliable and a steward of our craft. So, these were things that we really wanted to make sure we were breeding, and we noticed a bit of a problem with it, I think, probably right around that first year as we were transitioning into welcoming our second class, that we really needed to make sure we were breeding this sense of integrity and trust amongst everybody, that if somebody was calling out of work, again, I'm just going to use that as an example, that you trust that the reasons that they're calling out of work are legitimate, and that they are investing their time, energy, and growth into being clinically competent, again, both in the hospital and outside the hospital as well. It all ties back to professionalism. That's kind of the overarching theme here. And you want everybody to then, again, reliably count on each other to collaborate and learn. When we do grand rounds, M&M, morning report, journal clubs, these are all assignments we're giving to the residents to help contribute to their own and their colleagues' education, and they have to really be invested in part of that as well. With that being said, we don't want to, again, forego that sense of team building and wellness, so that we still made sure to have plenty of events and time for wellness, while still tying it back to what their responsibilities are and trying to get everybody to buy in. I think what us as faculty kind of saw from that 50,000-foot view, so to speak, about what our bigger picture and vision was for this. And then again, how it all ties into legacy and reputation, because at the end of this, they have to think about job prospects, and the reputation that this program was going to have for their subsequent classes. Once we started kind of recognizing some of these problems and follies that we were seeing in that first year, we really made a point to start a process where we're really providing, and again, this wasn't meant to be punitive in any way, but it really is mentorship that promotes accountability and an understanding of consequences to these residents, so that they can kind of continue to grow and move themselves and the program forward. Okay, so with that, I'm going to ask Debbie to jump on here, and she can kind of talk briefly about some of the specific things that we actually implemented in the program to help with some of these initiatives.
Great, yes. So we actually started at the beginning of a calendar year, and we called it New Year, New Program. We set these guidelines, these basic expectations that we had for our residents, seeing that maybe it was difficult to go from a transition of being student to resident without having that role model, that senior resident, that chief resident to help them kind of guide them through residency. So a few of the specific things that we kind of focused on was time thefts. So you are a resident, you are a learner, but you're also an employee. You're getting paid to be here. We wanted to ensure that our residents were getting to their shift on time. Similarly to how Dan was speaking about as attendings, if somebody calls out, somebody has to come in, or you have to reshuffle the structure of the day based on what attendings are available, our residents didn't really have anybody to that would have to call in. But they also didn't have someone that they had to come in and relieve and get sign out from. So they necessarily weren't there on time every shift. So we started to know this become a problem. So what we had them do is utilize the team entrance. That way we can really record the time they're coming in. And, Dan would run regular reports from security to see that everybody was coming to the shift on time. If you had more than 2 latenesses in a 6-month period, you had an extra shift. And we would expect you to be on time for that extra shift as well. And then obviously more severe consequences if this became a pattern. Another thing that we focused on were duty hour logs. Similarly to us as attendings, there are certain professional requirements, professional hygiene that we have to uphold. One of these is duty hour logs for our residents. We were seeing that they would go a few months without logging their duty hours. And fortunately enough, we have TPAs that have been wonderful that would help with this, but this is part of their professional responsibilities. So if we saw that they were not compliant for more than 2 weeks in a 3-month period, they would also get an extra shift. When it comes to their learning, and once again, they're learners, they're residents, and we expect them to ultimately become board certified physicians and be able to pay that pay bump that you get if you become board certified. We expect them to do their Rosh review questions. So Rosh review for us is during their asynchronous learning. They do some questions prior to conference on Wednesday. If we saw that there were more than 2 latenesses that were unexcused in a 6-month period, then they would have to get extra questions, present at conference, or if it became a pattern and became worse, we would have to remediate them. Also, sometimes you're just kind of going through the questions. If we notice that maybe that's what was happening and they were consistently performing below average, then we would consider a formalized study plan for that resident. We previously, with our first class, we had a 10th percentile for the IT exam, but now with our new year, new program a few years back, we increased that to being the 30th percentile, or else you get mandatory remediation planning. Also, part of our professional responsibilities as attendings and as residents is prescribing medications for our patients. In order to prescribe that narcotic, that controlled substance, you needed to have ID.me. So if our residents were not downloading this on their phone and verifying with IT that it was working properly, they would be subject to adverse actions. This was similarly to being able to log in and do a death certificate. This is part of patient care and is important for patient care. And as attendings, it's something that they're be expected to do. So it was also another part of their professional responsibilities that we expect from them as well. And I think from here, I pass it back to you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. So, yeah, again, these were just the idea of trying to give some real tangible examples, and I don't want it to seem to our audience like any of this was meant to be punitive. It's not. But the idea is to really, again, without chief residents or a reputation of what people were experiencing, without alumni. Without to share their stories of what it's like out there as attendings working in the real world, accountable to an employer. We had to we had to really kind of take the time and make the choice as faculty to really mentor them with some of these things about what their professional responsibilities were. And some of these things are not always glamorous, and I think we know that practicing medicine and emergency medicine especially right now is a challenge. And so our first class especially, and even a little bit in our second class, there were some follies, but I'm really proud to say that we saw the results of these things really in that last year really well. We were able to take some of those follies and really turn them into successes. And now we've already, again, we're graduating our 3rd class just next week. And I can tell you that up to this point of 2 classes now that have had the opportunities to take the boards and qualify for the oral exam, we're now at a point where we have a 100% board passage rate with all our graduates. Everybody's actually gainfully employed and doing well. We still stay in touch with them. Some of them are coming to our graduation next week, which is really great, our alumni. And in what will now be 3 graduating classes of 6 residents, we've had 3 people go on to fellowships, which is something we're really proud of. and another 4 out of those 3 classes that have actually stayed on as attendings to work within the Northwell Health System. So again, I think some all really good markers of success. With that, I know we're kind of getting low on time. I'm going to stop there and kind of open things up for any other discussion. I am just kind of looking at one of the chats here, asking about how do you deal with a faculty member who is not on board or opposing some of the changes. And I see the applause from Tom. Thanks very much. So dealing with a faculty member that's not on board or opposing some of the changes. I mean, I have certainly some of my own opinions, but I don't know if Andrew, I think you're probably more intimately close to this just in terms of timing.
Yeah, this is a very near and dear to my heart question. I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can approach this question. I think it really depends a little bit on your personality and the institution. I'm a big believer in, dangling the carrot as much as you can before you use your stick. And then you also have to make sure that you have the power within your department or institution to make sure that you are implementing anything that you really need done. So we've had a few people who, I don't think they're fully opposed, but we're very hesitant, and some continue to be a little bit hesitant. Whether it's because they don't want to teach, they don't feel comfortable, they don't want to take the time, they feel like it's decreasing their numbers, whatever it is. So, the first thing I ever do is just sit down and talk to them. Be like, this is the feedback that I'm getting about you. Are you really against this? Do you really not like it? If they're vocal up to that point, you already know the answer to that. So then I give people an out. I say, if you don't want to work with residents, tell me now. And, most of the time they won't say yes, because the next thing I say is, well, if you don't want to work with residents and you're not going to grow the interns into second years and the second years into third years, when you decide that you do want to work with residents, you're going to be starting with our intern class for that year, and you won't have the benefit of working with PGY 2s and 3s. You'll be working mostly with our PGY 1s, just like everybody else who put in the work up front. Because once you have PGY 3s, everybody wants them. So from my perspective, again, like I try to do the carrot, like this is the benefits, it actually makes it more fun to be on shift, think about that really problem patient that you have and how you deal with it. And wouldn't you rather, instead of having to deal with it, teach somebody else how to deal with it? Because that's really important too. And if they say no, then I say, okay, well, just so you know, moving forward, as we have a full complement of 45 residents, there won't really be any place within the department for non-teaching faculty, which means that you're going to be required to go to shifts that don't have residents, which are mostly Tuesday overnights and Wednesday mornings when we have didactics and people are protected. So you're not going to get a lot of good shifts. You're going to end up doing the shifts that nobody wants. Because the residents don't change their schedule, you do. And we have the power to make that happen. So I never do things without telling people. If I am going to impose some type of weird shift change on them, I always tell them straight up and straightforward, because it's really important for them to know the repercussions, not only to the residents, but also to themselves and kind of how that'll affect their schedule. Honestly, it's never really gotten to that point. Mostly it's just sitting down and exploring why they don't want residents and addressing those issues. And that usually takes care of everything 99% of the time. And then also just showing them the benefits of having residents, whether they're brand new interns all the way up to PGY 3s. And eventually, if they really don't want them, they're going to end up leaving your institution and going somewhere else for work, because once you have an established program, there's not much else.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we've had some changes to the faculty over the last few years here for very similar reasons. Most people have stayed on and most people buy in, but we've definitely had some turnover in faculty that just don't find it the best fit to work here anymore with the change of environment. So I agree. There are a couple of other questions in the chat we can try to get to quickly. Pick, maybe if you want to take this one. If you're dealing, how are you dealing with the challenges EM is facing right now in either a new program or really I think in any program with less capture, and I know some of the challenges EM has faced with matching recruitment the last couple of years.
So I think Andrew mentioned some of this in his talk about what is your expected recruitment strategy, how many people are you expecting to interview for that stuff. I think there's a bunch of uncertainties. The other programs in anesthesia, radiology, who have kind of gone through a situation where we're going to have a glut of programs, we're overproducing residents, have kind of come out on the other end looking just fine. We have this jobs report that really made less attractive to a lot of potential trainees. And some of it was because there were new programs. And then the idea is, okay, we're overproducing. I think that the existence of COVID should change a lot of math in terms of how many of us will be left. And Andrew was talking about this as well before. I think that if nothing else changes, you might have a glut of positions at the end is one way to look at that, and we don't really know the answer. And I think that both you guys kind of mentioned people deserve to have well-trained EM doctors, and that's what we do. We train doctors who are going to take good care of patients, and that should be good for patients. Unless we are training doctors who are not going to be up to the standards of emergency medicine. So I think it's the more attention you pay to making a new program worthwhile for the trainees, sort of self-defends its existence, right? If we are turning out a good product, and so maybe the idea is that going forward, we should have a very good idea of what the minimum standards for that good product are, right? And hold programs to that accountability.
Thanks, Peck. And then there's one final question here asking about an additional shift as kind of a strange punishment, so to speak, because we're working the job that you're expected to do. So, since I know assigning the extra shift kind of came from my little piece on this, I'll kind of share my thoughts on this. And that is that one, every time I know assigning extra shifts is not a new thing, right? It was around when I was a resident. I know this conversation comes up oftentimes on the court listservs about repercussion and things like that, things that you can do. And I want to be clear, the way I've always framed this is that it's not intended, especially in the case, where we sometimes use it in our program, it's not intended always to be punishment per se. It really is part of what I call that the mentorship paradigm that we're really trying to instill in people, which is kind of near and dear to my heart, which is not just teaching these young doctors how to be a doctor, right? They have to learn how to read an EKG. They have to learn how to make diagnoses. They have to learn how to communicate with patients. You also have to learn how to be a doctor in 2024 in the real world. There's a maturity and an adulting, so to speak, that kind of comes with it. And it's kind of a niche, I think, of residency training that I feel really strongly about. And so the point is to really teach them how to be accountable to their employer, to themselves, to their craft, to their teammates. And that's why I kind of use that, being late, so to speak, as an example, as a tangible example, of calling out of work as a tangible example. And so, again, it's not expected to be punishment, but I will say no one wants to give up their time either, right? Like if you have a day off and a weekend off, and now suddenly I've interrupted those plans, there is a lesson learned there. The other tangible example I will use, and this comes from anecdotes that I've heard from other places. I think we all know it, right? We all have colleagues that are known to show up a few minutes late, right? I think we all, I see some smiles and smirks on the camera. The shift starts at 7 a.m. That person's not getting there till 7:05, 7:10. There's always a little traffic, or they spilled their coffee on, there's always something, right? We all know that person. And I think more often than not, we all take it in stride. It's not that big a deal. Things do happen every once in a while, right? But there are those frequent offenders, and I think we all know who those people are, in our groups. And I will tell you that I have been at places where it was a real chronic and, dare I say, even debilitating problem, where at some point the leadership of the department kind of had enough and said, you know what? They're going to check the badge and reports, right? I didn't reinvent the wheel here. I kind of took ideas from around. They checked the badge and reports. They put together a nice little docket of all the literal minutes that they were being paid to work, and they were not at work. And over the course of several months and several, even a year, you kind of add it up and you say, you know what? Our institution has paid you a salary for X number of shifts, and you were only present technically for Y number of shifts, right? And you can kind of make that argument. And that individual got scheduled for an additional number of shifts to make up for the missed time that they were not paid additional for, or anything like that. And this is at the attending level. And that's how they kind of balanced it out. And so again, these are trends and ideas and philosophies, I guess, that carry with you into the attending life. And I think it's important for the residents, even at this young phase of life, for them to understand that, to feel it, to be accountable to it. And again, when we're talking about culture and new programs, it's taken a couple of years, I think, for us to get there as a program, because again, that first year or two, didn't see it because you don't see those senior classes. Now I think we're kind of getting there, and of course our messaging is consistent. But I think again we're finally kind of there, and we've really started to hum along in that regard. It's
And,
significantly less of a problem than it used to be.
And Dan, I will admit to having had that kind of thought. Like, do you want to sign a shift? Like, that's like, it's so terrible to go to work and practice emergency medicine, like that you've chosen to do for the rest of your life. But I do think that the idea about you have to be a good EM citizen and you have to function in your shop. And right now, your residency program will assign you an extra shift because it will probably help you be a better doctor and you'll get more reps under your belt and see more patients. But in the real world, when you're attending and this happens, they will assign you fewer shifts, not an additional shift, and then you'll be not having that job. And that is the progression that you'll be in. So like, you're welcome. You're gonna work and learn and get better, as opposed to you don't have to work here anymore. Honestly, the we will charge you for your time is above and beyond, because think about the workload that is. I think most chairs would be just like, it's not worth my time. This person's not going to work here anymore.
That is another potential outcome. But yeah, I think to your point, Pick, it's I think we're all going to the same, right? We're all kind of talking about ultimately the same point, and how we're trying to stand up our programs, and how we're just trying to stand up young doctors and to be good doctors, to take care of good patients, and how to be, I think, like you said, Pick, it's a good point, to be good citizens, within the specialty. So, all right, I think we are kind of out of time, maybe a few minutes over, but I think this has been a great conversation, and a good talk amongst everybody. I want to thank all of my colleagues for joining today and being part of this, and for SAEM and on behalf of the Faculty Development Committee for helping to sponsor this. And with that, I will bid everybody a good afternoon. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.